Welcome to The Beautiful Side of Grief, your go-to podcast if you're wanting to hear from people who have moved through heart-wrenching loss or those who are at the coalface supporting the process. It's diverse, heartwarming, though most of all it is positive and filled with go-tos that you can use yourself. I'm your host, Helen Morris, and I'm a health professional turned energy healing practitioner after I lost my only child and daughter, Tal, in a car accident in 2017. I want to use my own unique experience with loss to help you navigate your journey. You will hear from grief coaches, mediums, authors, first-hand loss accounts, plus many, many more. I'll put the links to any free resources in the episode notes. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you can keep informed of each weekly episode. So now grab a pen and paper if you want to jot things down. Sit back and relax as we navigate the beautiful sides of grief. What happens when you have a leading scientist in his field come face to face with not one, but several spiritual experiences through NDE or near-death experience? Well, that is what we're going to be exploring with my guest today, Brent Sattersfield. He's the inventor of DNA testing technologies, which have impacted millions of people across the globe. Following his multiple experiences with heaven, he became a student of consciousness, faith, and experiences of God in cultures around the world. This has also led him to authoring two books. The first is Faith to Produce Miracles, which was released in 2018. And his latest book, I think, has a great title, Bringing Heaven Home. This is fascinating stuff. So thank you for joining me and sharing this far and wide, certainly if you know of others who could benefit from this podcast series. I'm grateful to have you here. So sit back and let's get into it. Fantastic to have you chatting with me today, Brent, to hear what can only be described as your fascinating journey.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be with you, Helen.
Now, your background is scientific, where you were truly regarded as a groundbreaker with your DNA testing technologies. I'd love to know a little bit about your experiences growing up that led you to becoming a scientist.
So both my parents were college educated. My dad ran businesses my whole life growing up, and there was always this expectation that I would go to college and I would do something marvelous with my life. And so I think it was almost hard to escape that mantle, that pressure to become something. But at a certain point, I embraced it and enjoyed it. I think the real desire, though, to become a scientist came from a 2-year volunteer mission where I spent in Brazil. And I was working with people there who didn't have what we see in our world. You know, they just didn't have the homes we have. Some of them had dirt floors and just more or less a tent that they lived in. And as I worked with them and just felt the compassion for them, I wanted to find a way to keep working with them the rest of my life. So as I moved into a career, I wanted a way to be able to come back and continue to impact them. And as I was passing through the Amazon, one of the tour guides was explaining the different medicinal properties of the plants there. And I thought, wow, this is what I want to do. I want to go into medicine. I want to go into diagnostics, and I want to find cures and diagnoses that help people in the developing world.
Oh, what a beautiful story that is. And, you know, I don't think anything is by accident. So the fact that you went to Brazil was almost like you were guided, you know, on that journey to open you up to what was possible and how to share and be compassionate with others. So that's great. Now, in my world, scientists are generally really evidence and fact-based people, and you have to prove it to believe it. So what age were you when you first had your near-death experience? What was it like? And how did it mess with that scientific, logical side of you that you had known all your life up to that point?
So it didn't mess with me as much as you might think, because it was my faith that led me into science to begin with. Again, just that 2-year volunteer mission in Brazil, it was my faith that was leading me to find ways to help people. And so going into science was kind of like an outgrowth of the faith itself. That being said, it was a good 15 years after that that I had my first out of body experience where I came face to face with the divine. And it did strongly impact a lot of those rigid beliefs, not just rigid beliefs in the scientific world, but rigid beliefs in the religious world as well. Because I was encountering something that just, there was no reference for it. And I hate to say that because in a religious setting, of course, we talk about the divine, we talk about love, but what I was experiencing was nothing that I'd been prepared for. It was not like what I was expecting. It was a liberating love that not only liberated me from religious ideas that I'd once had, but also from the logic that had been so important to me in the scientific world.
Yeah. Did you see and feel it, or was it just a feeling, or how did it present for you?
It was both. There was a sense that the sight that I was having was not with my physical eyes. And so it was more of a feeling that was so intense that my mind interpreted it with something that was akin to sight.
Wow, that's fascinating. All right, now, because it's good that you brought it up, that you sort of had no reference to it, because I understand that you were brought up with quite a rigid Christian mindset. And, having this experience, did you share it with your family? And if you did, what was your reaction to it? Because, that would have been really outside of their realm of thinking as well. And because it would have also been questioning, the foundations by which they live by.
Right. So in the beginning, I didn't share anything. And by family, I mean, I had my wife and my children at the time, and then I had my parents, and then there were her parents. And so you get this extended family going on. And within my religious setting, I did not feel comfortable sharing what I'd seen initially, not even with my wife and children. It was just something that I kept deeply inside, and I wanted to tell people about it, but I didn't know how, because it just felt so foreign to what I felt they were expecting.
How long did you keep it inside for before you started sharing it?
About 5 years.
Wow, that's a long time. And I guess you were just trying to make sense of it all, find out where it sort of all the pieces fitted into.
Yes. And now I was fortunate that I ran into some other people who had had near death experiences or related out of body experiences. And occasionally they would open up and share with me, which gave me permission to share in return. So I wasn't totally silent. It just, I wasn't able to share with other family members. And honestly, to this day, it's not something that my family members feel terribly comfortable talking about. They kind of acknowledge and say, "That's nice. You have some spiritual feelings, and go talk about that with your friends." But they're not that interested.
Yeah. I'm a little bit left field for my family sometimes too. And, although they're incredibly supportive of me and that, they really don't get what I do and why I do it and why I want to do it. So, yeah, I completely get that. So you had not one, but multiple of these experiences. And, I can just imagine from the first one, that would have been enough just to hugely impact your life. But why do you suppose that you had multiple?
It's a really wonderful question. I'm still working out that part of my narrative. For me, there have been a lot of lessons that have come from it. And if you talk to anybody who's had a near-death experience or some other out-of-body experience, it seems like it's a very intimate part of the learning they're going through in this life. And for me, having multiple, it gave me perspectives outside of my religious understanding. Yeah, coming out of a Christian background, when I first had an experience, I was seeing things and feeling things that were different than what I was taught on Sunday. But at the same time, Jesus was there. And so I'm thinking, well, this kind of confirms my belief. And so it didn't really break me free of the way that I was thinking about the world and seeing the world. But as I had more experiences, I was shown the divine from the perspectives of different cultures. And
Wow.
it was kind of like almost like if you were grow up eating one type of ice cream, you're eating vanilla ice cream your whole life, and you don't even know that there's any others. And you just keep saying to everybody, but this vanilla ice cream is wonderful. You need to have this flavor. And then somebody finally introduces you to chocolate and you say, wait,
Oh,
not that vanilla is bad, but chocolate's really good. And so the experience of God through the eyes of different cultures is different. It's different in an energetic way where it's like a whole different flavor, a whole different taste, a whole different experience. And it's beautiful. And so it gave me some perspective to step back and say, wait, it's okay that I'm having beautiful experiences in my chosen path, but other people are having beautiful experiences too. And it, my experiences don't necessarily invalidate theirs or vice versa. In fact, we can learn from each other. There's a lot that we can learn from each other.
yes. It's so important that because, sometimes we get stuck in our own viewpoint of the world. And when you open it up, like you say, and realize that, everybody's else's perspective is so valid, that really does open up you to completely new horizons, which is fantastic lead into my next question that I'm wanting to know about you, because you're young, yet you're a prolific learner, and you've become a master in like so many modalities like matrix energetics, theta healing, Reiki, and other healing modalities. And in addition to studying the techniques of Native Americans, Hindu miracle workers, and Christian street healers. Now, they are diverse in itself. So why were you so driven to explore these modalities firsthand and on such a global scale? So I know that you got these visions, but wasn't it enough to try and understand them just purely from the written teachings that are out there? Why did you feel you needed to go firsthand?
The written teachings, I mean, I love that we have them. That gives us such a wonderful starting point to tell us there's something more about life.
Yeah.
But once you go from the written teaching to the experiential, there's no comparison. I mean, it's like going from a two-dimensional life to a three-dimensional life, going from black and white to color. And so as beautiful as the written teachings are, it's kind of like if you're studying music and you're just looking it on the sheet and you're trying to memorize that, like, this note means an E note and this note means a C note, but you haven't actually heard the music. You haven't actually experienced it or played it or felt it in your soul. And there is such a difference between what is written and what is experienced. And once you experience it, you go back and you can read those words and they mean something entirely different from what you were raised thinking that they meant.
Oh, such a beautiful explanation. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it makes us sort of think outside of, just trusting and believing in just what is written. It's actually a prompt to get out there and experience it yourself and see what your perspective is of that. So, yeah, that's great. So there's a review on your latest book, Bringing Heaven Home, that I really want to share with our listeners. And then we'll have a chat about it. This is written by Karen Pryor, and I hope I got her surname right. And she is the author of Understanding the Divine. So she really talks about, I feel changed just reading his book, finding within myself the desire to go deeper, fly higher, and reach farther than ever before. If you're reading this now, you're reading for the next step on your path to enlightenment and ascension. Wow. So that is a huge review coming from somebody who already understands that realm and that dimension quite well herself, I imagine. And so, bringing heaven home, let's have a chat about that and share with our listeners why you wrote this book, what you would like people to get from this book.
I think there's always a number of different angles that an author has when they're writing a book. And any part of writing a memoir is in part to understand your own journey. It's to make sense of it. It's to weave the threads together. But the question as to why share that with others is something else entirely. And for me, there was this beautiful journey that consisted not only of the experiences with the other side and not only of the learning that came from those specific experiences, but a gradual awakening, this sense of consciousness becoming aware of itself to the degree that a deeper understanding started to unfold beyond just what's being taught in the experiences. And so it was my hope that in writing the book that anybody reading it could come face to face with the paradigms, the belief systems that they were raised with, and take a hard look at them and start asking those questions about what it is that's truly missing from the heart, and to be able to connect in a very real and raw way with some of my own experiences where there's a lot of suffering. I know you talk about the beautiful side of grief in your podcast. And, I went through moments in my life where I was suicidal, where, there's a lot of grief. So there's a realism in this journey as well. And then grappling with those belief systems and then coming to find something beautiful and embracing what's in our own hearts. And finding that the voice that we have been longing to listen to has always been inside of us. It isn't the outside voices of our friends or family or culture or religion. It's that voice talking to us inside of our own hearts.
Yes, yes. Wow, that's a lot to absorb, because I imagine there's, some people who are listening to this who just think it's all a bit woo-woo. It's all a bit out there. You're really pushing the boundaries, Brent. And I just don't know about this, but like I heard you describe it as almost like East meeting West, where, it's a weaving of, what we may believe as in our Western society, but also, opening ourselves up to what is happening with Eastern, I don't know what's the right word, Eastern practices probably would describe it well. Yeah, that actually open us up and give us a broader understanding. So what comes from that? So once you start to explore that and you start to realize that there is more to this, what happens for people?
Life changes. You stop seeing it from within your own little quadrant in the space that you've been raised, or the space that you've chosen to affiliate with. And you realize that there's so many areas of understanding, not just secular understanding, but spiritual understanding, different ways of deriving meaning in life and experiencing joy. And as we start to see the way that different cultures relate to the divine and experience joy within that relation, it's almost like it expands our language. It expands the musical notes that we have to play in order to find joy in our own lives and in order to interact with other people in this world. My personal belief, one of the things, going back to your previous question about why did I write the book, one of the things I've come to believe is that each culture holds tools that can help us understand more about why we're here, and tools that help us to connect to our own divine origins. And that as we start to learn the tools from various cultures, they work together to help us accomplish a result that we could not just from one perspective. It's a little bit like my own career. I've interacted with the developing world quite a lot. I've met with leaders of different governments, and I've brought forth a lot of diagnostic technology to help lower the cost of healthcare in some of these countries. But what allowed me to do that is that I was not just a scientist. I also studied intellectual property law. I studied business. I studied a number of different disciplines. And it was in the confluence of those disciplines, the bringing them together, that I was then able to go out and accomplish a much bigger impact in this world. And I believe it's the same thing when it comes to spiritual understanding.
Oh, yeah, that's good. So your book also deals a lot with healing the heart, and you also talk about where, perhaps current religious structures have left the heart wanting. So, yeah, talk to us about that.
I think that's one of those things that each of your listeners probably has their own understanding already. They're either deeply satisfied with their current religious practice, or there's a sense of, wait a minute, something's missing. And a lot of the people that I run into as adults, they kind of reflect back on their childhood and think there was something in their religious experience that they want to connect to, but there was too much junk, for lack of a better word. There was too much that they could not accept or swallow along with it. And part of the thought process in writing this book is to give people the permission to start exploring those places, the hurt places of the heart, the hidden places, to discover what was beautiful about their childhood experiences, and to give them permission to extract that from all of the other stuff that just didn't fit and didn't work. To give them permission to start listening to their hearts and to connect to the divine, not through somebody else's rule set, but to start connecting based on what their own hearts are telling them. This whole thing that each of us are experiencing, it's like a process of unlocking our own hearts. And you need to find the combination, not to my heart, but to your heart.
Yeah. There's a lot of grace and respect there when you talk about this, which I really appreciate, because what you're not trying to do is change what people are already happy and satisfied with. But if people are still left wanting, still left questioning, then this is a way, you're presenting them with some avenues that they could perhaps look at that could give them that meaning, that understanding that they're looking for. So that's really good, because I know from my perspective, I grew up totally as an atheist. I did not want a bar of religion at all. From my early experiences with religion, where if you didn't belong to the right religion, then you were shut out. And I didn't agree with that at all. So that influenced, and it was only probably I probably had times moving through my life that, I questioned things, but it was truly losing my daughter that actually, I really allowed myself to open up to actually looking at all of this and understanding it and realizing that there are many different dimensions to it. And, and that fills my heart. So, yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's great. And what is it that you would like people to know if they are experiencing like these? Now, I'm going to call it a near-death experience. And what did you call it earlier? You called it a...
out-of-body experience.
Okay. Are they one and the same thing?
They can be. A lot of near-death experiences are out-of-body experiences. Not all out-of-body experiences happen when somebody crosses that threshold through death. You can have similar, if not identical, experiences during moments of prayer and meditation, or even spontaneously, just during the day. Sometimes it can happen for people where they cross over without having to die to get there.
All right. So what would you recommend? What would be your advice to people who are experiencing that and getting quite freaked out about it, that they don't want to share it, they don't want to talk about it?
First off, that you're not alone, and that some experiences are very beautiful, some experiences are not. But the main thing is to recognize that whatever experience you've had was given to you so that you can feel more understanding for life, for your connection to the other side. It's about learning. And then the second thing would be that it's not necessary or even helpful to share with some of the people you think you ought to share with. Most often, your family members and caregivers are going to be the least receptive to what it is that you have to say. And so if you can just let go of the need for them to accept what you've experienced, it's very helpful. But at the same time, if you can put forth the intention that life, that the universe will return to you somebody who will listen respectfully, lovingly, it's amazing what it can do to have somebody to share with. And until you find that person, write it down. Become your own source of reflection. Write it down, think through it, reflect on it.
That's really good advice. Thank you. You're part of a community called Inner World Movement. What's that all about? And why do we need to have a connection with our inner and outer world?
So many of us grow up being taught that life is what we make of it. It's how intelligent we are and how diligently we went at working at life with our hands. And yet, if you step back for a moment and just breathe and look at people who seem to have beautiful lives, they're not always the people who are the most intelligent or diligent in school or who work the hardest on the job. It seems like some people just have doors open for them. And if you'll reflect onto this, it kind of pokes holes in the idea that our external world is based off of how hard we work. And one of the things that I have seen on the other side, and I'm not alone in this, there are a number of people who've seen something similar, is that the way that our world shows up around us is not independent from how we feel about ourselves and the world around us. That this is very much like in quantum physics, where they've discovered that very small molecules, smaller than an atom, called quantum particles, they don't behave the way that matter is supposed to behave. They pop in and out of existence, and they do it in a way that is connected to human thought. It's connected to consciousness. And so, given that our world is made up of these little tiny particles that are popping in and out of existence based off of human consciousness, it shouldn't be too much of a surprise to understand that what I am seeing, or what I've seen in my experiences on the other side, what other people have seen in their experiences, that is that what we put into our hearts tends to be reflected in the world around us. And so there is this idea that if you are hurting, that it's a wonderful thing to be able to come to terms with your grief, not to hide from it or suppress it or distract yourself from it, but to actually go in and love the part of you that's hurting. To love the part of you that's hurting in a way that no one else around you has ever been able to do. Not your parents, not your friends, not your religious community, but to be with it personally and deeply the way that you always wanted a lover to do. And as that heals, you would be surprised to find that the opportunities in your life change dramatically. That the types of people that show up, the types of experiences that show up start to reflect that healing and reflect the degree of self-love that you're offering yourself.
Wow. There is, oh my gosh, I was just about in tears as you were talking about that, because I so understand what you're saying there, because from my own experience with grief, that's what opened my heart up, as ironic as it sounds. My daughter loved me unconditionally, but I didn't really trust anybody else to love me. So I allowed her to love me, but nobody else. And in losing her, I had to find that way forward and open my heart up. And it made me drop to the side everything that I had previously known, because I changed my complete and entire life. I decided, okay, this is the worst possible thing that's happened to me. It doesn't matter what happens going forward, because I've already experienced the worst. So bring it on. I can be who I want to be now. And it gave me the freedom to be that. And what that did was it brought into my life exactly what you were saying, opportunities and experience I would never have thought possible beforehand. Like, I'm now certified in, energy healing. And so I do that. And also doing this podcast. I'm an introvert. What's an introvert doing a podcast who didn't have very much self-belief in herself, So it's those things. And I feel my heart, and so open and so full of gratitude. So, wow, thank you for sharing that, because, that just made so much sense to me. And that's probably a beautiful way for us to just, finish this off. And so I'm just going to finish off with a couple of questions for you. So what is the most beautiful thing or best thing that has happened to you today or this week?
Oh, well, I'd say this podcast rates up there.
Oh, thank
And
you.
and I mean that. It's the chance, because you mentioned you being an introvert. I'm an introvert as well. And I don't know about for you, but for me to take the time and interact with somebody socially, to be able to share the deep thoughts of my heart that I haven't been able to share with some of my family members, and
Yes.
to express in a way that hopefully inspires other people to feel healing. It is a beautiful part of my life. And so I really enjoy doing these types of podcasts. And I especially love it when I've got a host such as yourself who just really has a lot of joy in doing it, and just very connected to what's in your own heart, and with this idea of wanting to share in a way that lifts other people.
Ah, thank you. It's the best answer you could have given. No, but it is beautiful though, and I appreciate you saying those beautiful things about this podcast, because that is definitely why I do it. It's not for myself, although I think it's helped myself, but the ultimate gain from this is for others, and you get that so well. All right, so if your day is not going so well, and a Kiwi term is we use is that if your day turns to custard, what's your go-to to getting yourself out of it, turning it around?
I don't know. I like that expression. That's the first time I've heard it. And I'm thinking if my day goes to custard, I'm going to get a spoon. So
Great, good stuff.
that actually sounds, I'm sure it has this awful meaning there, but for me, I'm listening to it for the first time and thinking that sounds delightful.
So just thinking about it turning to custard is going to pivot it for you.
It can. And there's a lot of different techniques for doing this. I think one of the easiest is to simply breathe. So often in life, the circumstances that feel awful, like we're going to die and we can't get through it, and those experiences aren't the experience itself. It's what we're thinking about the experience, and it's the emotions that are coming from what we're thinking about it. And so anytime that we're doing that, we're no longer connected to ourselves in this moment as we could be. And so just to return our attention to just breathing and relaxing our body and reminding ourselves that the only thing we have to do in this exact moment is breathe, it really sheds some of that heaviness. And if you can take just a couple minutes doing that, maybe have some relaxing music or kind of envision a place that makes you relax. Like for me, I like to see the beach. I just love the beach. It can help you to relax some. Another method that I like is to place my hands on my heart and just acknowledge the places that are afraid, and just kind of talk to those places almost as if I'm talking to a small child, and just saying, you know what, I see that you're feeling afraid. I see that you're hurting. I see that you're not feeling listened to. And just to pay attention to what's afraid, to what's hurting. And it's amazing how often that if you can let go of the emotion for just a little bit and you get back into that kind of calm, peaceful state of mind, that the rest of your day just changes. It's like you unlock the capacity of the divine to flow through you and help fix the problem for you.
Yeah, that's great. So so the situation is just an event. And what we do is that we add the emotion to it. So what we need to do is then take that emotion back down. And we can do that by breathing, taking a couple of minutes. That's good.
Yeah.
All right. So what would be your 3 takeaways for anybody who is listening today?
So the 3 takeaways may even be 1 or 2 points that we didn't quite get to.
Yeah.
But the first, and I hope to tie them back in with your podcast theme too, this beautiful side of grief. One of the experiences that most impacted me on the other side, I was always thinking of that when you got to the other side, there'd be some kind of a judgment, some kind of a life review, and that maybe there would be shame or regret or other negative feelings. But it was actually surprising that my experience of it was not of being shamed, but rather being released from shame. It was it was the opposite of how I saw Judgment Day, where I was being released from my judgment of my life so that I could feel love in a deeper and more beautiful way. But one of those areas of judgment that I got to release was on these moments of grief, these intense moments of sadness, of shame, of regret, of I wish I had not made that choice. And whether it was something that you feel that you messed up or that you came into somebody else's life where they messed up, either way, there's this moment of pain that it just seems like it's difficult to let go of and it's hard to make sense of. And on the other side, what I saw is that there is such a tremendous love and a tremendous joy that exists. And it exists in part because of these difficult experiences we've gone through here. And so these heartache moments that we so often regret and judge and condemn, these are the moments that, at least in my experience of the other side, I was most grateful for. Yeah. They were the moments that filled me with understanding of, oh my goodness, this is why I was in this world to begin with. And they weren't mistakes. They were my most sacred teachers, preparing me for the love that I have always wanted to experience, not just in this life, but in the hereafter.
Yeah. Whoa. That is so beautiful. That is very, very powerful. And, I hope our listeners will just take a moment to rewind and re-listen to that, because it is exactly what you're saying. We spend so much time and energy berating ourselves, putting ourselves down for what we're feeling, what we're experiencing, and that, rather than saying, oh, what's this teaching me? What do I need to know from this? And being able to use it as a stepping stone to actually moving forward. So that is great. I like that. Okay. Wow, it has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you, Brent. I knew it was going to be a great conversation because you fascinated me from the first moment I started reading what you had sent in to me. And I just felt this connection, and I appreciate you, sharing from your heart and from your own personal experiences of what these beautiful forays into enlightenment have been. And I'm hoping that our listeners will just feel and be able to trust that as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Helen.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode today, feel free to share it with others. Hit the subscribe button so you can be notified of each weekly episode. Also, rate and review, especially if there is more you want to know that perhaps we didn't have time to touch on today. And if you are after resources to help you out on this journey, head to healingtobeYou.com and check those out there. So until next time, be kind to you, and thank you for joining us on the beautiful side of grief.